An apple a day keeps the doctor away, but a glass of OJ keeps the adversary at bay. Here's Oddjob. Hey, it's time for a glass of OJ. I'm Oddjob. So, over the last week, I have been at a conference in Washington, D.C. called CISO Exchange. I was invited to be on a panel that was about empowering security culture across the enterprise. And it was a fantastic event. Loads of great people. Learned a lot from other people that are actually CISOs. I merely report to one. So that was very, very nice to be included in that. Thanks again to Alyssa Miller for recommending that they pop me in to that panel. And it was actually the first panel to go. So it was kind of a keynote opening panel. So that was kind of also a shock to me when I saw the agenda right before going to the event. It was like, oh, wow, pressure's on. You open the whole thing. So that was fun. It was a blast. It was great to learn from so many great people. It was great to disagree with people. There were people who I disagreed with, that some things I may have changed my mind on or am now open into considering, but also I think maybe I gave some thoughts to people that have made them rethink something or think a little differently on something, which is what the conference is all about, right? Is sharing what works, what hasn't worked in certain situations, what could be better, all of that. That's how we get better. Although there were vendors too, it wasn't very vendor heavy, right? So there were no sponsored speakers. They did have a few of the sponsors run some kind of like discussion session and things like that, but it was only loosely branded. It did have to do with their subject matter expertise, but it was really about giving prompts for discussion among the CISOs and of course the presenter that they had. So it was very useful. If you're a security leader, director, manager, or CISO level, I recommend finding where the next CISO Exchange near you is going to happen, and seeing if you can register for it. I know they do kind of control and cap the attendeeship for it. So they are really looking for CISOs, but there were some non-CISOs there, people who report to CISOs there. So, if you're at that CISO or CISO -1 level, you should go ahead and ask to join, be connected into that group. So I just have some key takeaways. I have ideas for videos. I have all kinds, that one's blank, but I have all kinds of notes I took throughout the entire thing. All of these paper pads and everything aren't full. I just stole them from the Watergate Hotel, which is where this event was. And I stole their pens too. So there's a joke about that. But yeah, go and steal some pens and pads the next time you're there. It's a great time. You might even read the pens too, just to show that they already assume you're going to steal them. So is it really stealing after all? So I want to go through a few takeaways. This glass of OJ is going to be very diverse in topic set, so it'll be very interesting to see all the different things, but there will be some takeaways for you here. I'm going to not mention who said what. I'm not going to name names and companies. A little bit of Chatham House rules do apply. If you find that your key takeaway is in here from the conference, and you were on a panel and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that discussion or something, and you made the comment or something like that, go ahead and if you want, you can jump in the comments and take some credit if you want, but I'm not going to be crediting anybody. But most of these takeaways aren't mine as far as the ideas themselves. I think there's one that I can kind of attribute to me kind of summarizing and enhancing a feeling that was on in the room or in the discussion. Anyway, we'll get to that. So there was at the last day, there were kind of two sessions about diplomacy and carrots and sticks, when to make a power play, when to be more diplomatic, and so there was this kind of idea in using cudgels that work best for your audience. So if you need to make that power play to make somebody, not do a thing they're thinking about going and doing. Perhaps reminding them, if they're in legal, that, there's a regulatory issue here that can't be ignored. And you might use the word material in with that to kind of warn them about what's going on. If they still continue to go and need you to sign off on something, then, you documenting on the side or in addendum to that thing you're signing, making sure it's documented that, using that word material, because in regulations a lot, the word material is what law seems to like to use to kind of reference the scope of that regulation and what kind of data or breaches or incidents are in scope for that legislation, for like reporting and when you need to report what to whom and how fast. So if a decision someone's going to make that seems to be approved by legal is going to end up causing some kind of material issue, then that's a tool you can have, is make sure you understand what you're doing when you do that, though. Make sure that it's not just a stupid hill you're going to die on. Make sure it really does apply. So you have to use your judgment there. And there's a credibility piece to it too, of doing those things at a time when making a power play like that, or doing those things at a time when it's truly necessary. And it really helps when then you can really show, yes, we dodged bullets because of this. And then at that point, it becomes a congratulatory and a thanking of people who ended up making the right decision, who ended up, acquiescing or doing whatever. And that builds credibility, because not only do you don't want to say, I told you so. You want to be able to say, I thank you. But sometimes things do happen, and something happens and you do have to say the I told you so's. But so when do you make those power plays? When do you tell, the leader of your organization, you have to essentially shut down operations of mission critical things in order to protect those mission critical things? That's important and huge. And being able to make a play like that, to say that this is what must be done in order to secure an update or do whatever to protect against an attack that's very imminent, and a very, very big threat to the environment. Knowing when to do that builds credibility as well, and helps you so that you can be diplomatic later. But use those very sparingly, right? You want to try to use, those cudgels. Someone used that word. You want to use them very sparingly, and especially if you're going to take a stick to somebody in a more punishing way, or in a way that's going to come back on them with consequences. You want to be very careful. And kind of speaking of sticks and consequences, at the very end there was a discussion about that kind of went into fish testing, and kind of giving a stick to users, kind of slapping their hands. And some people had been talking about tying bonuses to their fish test results, putting on their performance reviews for their managers and things like that. And of course, you have my video from a couple weeks ago about fish testing and how you should stop doing it. Of course, I have a video even further back where I was saying, here's how you get value out of fish testing. So I've changed my mind, obviously, about things. And I had brought that up actually during the course of the event over the couple days, as I'd kind of either been saying one-on-one with people or in a couple sessions making brief points. And the person leading the panel kind of looked at me and the audience. And I think you have a disagreement on that topic, since we're kind of already deep into this topic. It's like, do you have a comment to make? He was already inviting my disagreement with what was on the panel, because he knew I had a disagreement, and I think knew I wasn't going to be an asshole either. I got a microphone in the audience, and I was able to just kind of say, I have a problem because of XYZ. I think we should do this instead. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's worth the investment to go at it from this angle. I think, and this is where I really kind of took it was really sticks should be more apportioned to ownership and accountability. A user isn't really accountable for shouldn't be accountable to the consequences of clicking on a link, because most of those consequences of clicking on a link are completely out of their control. They possibly have some ownership and accountability over clicking the link in general, but a lot of these fishes are fantastic. They're great. I've clicked stuff that was on fish tests before, as I've said before. So I don't think you can necessarily do that. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's just human nature. We're going to fail. Our brains aren't going to work the way we really like them to. And so you really are relying more on the people who are delivering that email to the user, and then the systems that the user is on that are going to then get compromised as a result, and all of the other dominoes that will fall at that time. Aren't there processes? Aren't there tools? Aren't there controls? Aren't there other things we should have in place already to protect, be able to respond and detect these issues, to lessen the impact of the risk of doing business, if you will, the user going through and doing their job and doing their processes? Do we fire a network administrator because they accidentally reconfigured a switch and didn't put in a security control on that one switch or router or firewall or something? No, we don't. We review what happened. We figure out how to make sure even that mistake doesn't happen again. If there's any type of accountability, it goes up to the top, right? Because at the top, this is now where you start getting systemic decision making and culture around what is okay and not okay to be, what is okay to be okay with. Oh yeah, we don't have a good asset inventory, and we have no good change control, and we have no good, and security has been calling this out for quarters and years, and we've still not made any meaningful progress towards having good asset inventory, good change control, good configuration control. And sure enough, it keeps coming up in incidents, and finally there was a big breach, and now we've got a well-documented thing. It's not going to be the network administrator you should get rid of. In SolarWinds, the CEO, or either the former or the current CEO at the time, went on the floor of Congress to a committee and essentially blamed an intern for the failure that allowed malware to essentially be in the source code of SolarWinds Orion product. And that was unconscionable that you would do that, because that intern should not have been able to impact the environment in that way. And so, so there's a lot more accountability. So you should apportion your sticks. If you're going to give punishment, or if you're going to give some kind of consequence, you need to apportion those consequences to ownership and accountability. And if there's loads of owners and accountable people that are along the line, then it needs to be spread. So it's not like all of them should receive the strong punishment. They should realize, okay, we're all at fault, but in different ways for different reasons. And honestly, at the end of the day, most of the time, it should be about improvement of process, lessons learned, making sure this doesn't happen again. And of course, there's always times where, all right, you've been the center, not just the symptom, but the center of decision-making processes these past 5 incidents, and you continue to refuse to do anything about it. Maybe it's time for leadership change, right? But again, you do that. You don't go down to the user and go, well, you've been at this, you've clicked on 5 things that have caused an incident, blah, blah, blah. We don't need you in this company anymore. That can be practical, but it doesn't really stop the issues that allowed everything else to happen just because you got rid of that user. Now you possibly got rid of, honestly, a good worker, a good employee, someone who follows their process and does their job well. So that was an idea in there. We are innovating our workers out of our companies. That was an interesting thought. So this was about the Great Resignation. I think it was entitled "How to Steal My Staff." That was a really funny discussion format session. And essentially, what was being referenced was a study done that was in the Great Resignation and IT workers, why did you leave? Why did you choose to leave the company you left? And 10% or so said that it was about toxic workplace culture. People leave their jobs or for their managers not because of pay or whatever. Some of that. Some of it was pay. Simply, hey, I'm just not seeing the value. I'm not getting paid as much anymore. But the third most was, and it was 3 point something percent. The third one was, there's way too much innovation around here. That could be a lot of things. That could be like, hey, I'm getting automated out of my job. I see it coming and I'm leaving. So that, that exists. It could be a situation where, this person knows their C++ and Java, and they may have some legacy apps they work on, but the company's also expecting them now to learn Go and have already learned Python. Maybe they learned Python over the past few years, and they're like, man, I just learned Python over the last 3 years. Now they want me to learn Go, and, Python's out and Go is in now. And, I just can't keep up with that. There is some of that attrition due to innovation. But I have to wonder how much of that 3 point something percent is due to companies transforming at a pace that they can't support with their current employees, meaning they can't train employees fast enough. They're moving way too fast, or potentially they're moving and just saying, screw it, we don't care. Catch up with us, the company, or we're just going to replace you. And it could be a situation too where you've got people who have been working in their C++ and Java apps for the past, 10, 15 years. Those would be considered legacy now. And sure enough, these newbies coming out of college, they know Go, they know Python, they know Angular, they know full stack and the modern full stack. And essentially they could basically recode your app or code a completely new app and deploy it faster than you ever could for like half the pay. So, there's that could just simply be the company going, easy button, hire a bunch of new people in, have them build the next big thing, keep everybody else out of it, and then migrate that data over, and now you no longer need these people. So they see the writing on the wall and they go away. So I wonder how much about is that. So support your staff. If you're innovating, are you supporting that innovation? How are you supporting that innovation? If it's simply through hiring people in and replacing people, then it's not so much the Great Resignation in that, it's the Great Replacement. And that's not okay. We need to be doing better. There are, however, people who just don't want to learn, or they're completely against, they're against learning new things. Security was in that for a while, definitely with cloud. Of course, back in the early days of modern cloud, there was a significant lack of security controls, and there was a lot more that was capable of doing up in the cloud that now we have a lot more control over. Given that, there were still people who were just adamant against anything in the cloud, that it's not okay, that it's someone else's computer and this and that. And because we don't have on-prem control, therefore we can't recommend it. And that was largely a big mistake. What I liken it to is the analog phone people when digital came out going, who's going to want digital? Everybody wants the call quality and clarity of having that analog signal and everything. No one's going to want digital. And sure enough, everybody moved to digital because it was better, had greater features, connected people more. And the people who replaced or who deployed those technologies largely were new to telecom, because they went and learned the digital, and everyone tooled and trained the digital at an entry level, and then they were able to go and do digital. And that was a true digital transformation of telecommunications. And you had the same thing with VoIP. You had the people go, digital, you're never going to want, to get rid of this and that and blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, they did. And so what? You had network administrators, you had other people who had never done maybe telecom before getting into telecom, ripping and replacing digital assets and, putting in VoIP assets, and those digital people were out of a job. It's going to happen with the next telecom marvel that comes out, that totally changes the way we do things. So there's always that natural attrition rate, people just being resistant to change and not wanting to upskill, and that's completely fine. That's their choice. So there is that, but I wonder how much of it truly is due to that. So there was also a DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. We always forget the last two, it seems. So we need to start talking more about what equity means and inclusion. And that, I think, is another great video to talk about how DEI can really help your cybersecurity workforce and strategy. But, you know, when you're looking to hire a diverse staff, maybe you've got all white males currently. So you want more people of color, you want women, you want non-binary folks. You know, when you have that situation and you go and pull resumes and you haven't checked to see if there's an appropriate amount of diversity to even look there, if it's all white people in the candidate pool, you can never end up getting to a diverse workforce, right? So a person on the panel said that they refuse to actually interview anyone until they have been assured by HR that the candidate pool that they are pulling from, that they're pulling resumes from now, is diverse. I don't know exactly how they're doing that. They may be keying in on some of the ethnicity, language choice, or things, you know, and maybe they're not looking at that personally. It's kind of blind from that perspective and from their perspective, but they're asking HR, hey, have we met a certain diversity threshold? You know, are there enough women in there? Are there enough people of color or from different non-white ethnicities? You know, are there disabled people, you know, to look at as well? And give them some numbers, you know, give them numbers like for the country you're in, for, let's just use America because that's where I'm at. If there's roughly 50%, you know, cis women, then is there roughly 50% cis women in the candidate pool? Is it even 20%? Is it even 30%? You know, is it 1%? You know, what number is that? And can we get it higher? And that may require you to go out to folks like WESIS, who actually, I will name her, Lynn Dom was on the WESIS, is with WESIS, and she was moderating that panel. And you know, she was saying, go reach out to people like WESIS, and I would recommend reaching out to Blacks in Cybersecurity. Go reach out to some of the local groups who represent more marginalized communities. There's Out in Tech if you want to go and find queer people, LGBTQ, and try and give them opportunities and say, hey, by the way, is there a job board you have? I want to post a job. You know, are there people I can get a hold of and try to, you know, select? Some people, they skip that interview process entirely, or the HR process, and they go out specifically to those groups and they gather candidates from that and say, I'm going to hire from these people specifically, or at least more specifically, and gathering from their network. So expanding your network's important. Going out and doing that, you know, outreach with these groups is super important, to letting them know that, you know, you're open for business to get them in here to transform the work staff, and providing them the upward mobility and career path to replace you at some point, or to move up into one of the positions of your peers, or something where they can move up, which may mean you need to move over or move up yourself so that, you know, you can make room for them. Those are little additions of my thoughts there. Someone even suggested removing names, because even having a female or male sounding name, even amongst female and male reviewers of resumes, will cause them to apportion more credibility and positive attributes to the male sounding name than the female sounding name. Studies have been done where they've gone and had like a profile of somebody and work history and things like that. And when it was a male sounding name, more often than not, had positive remarks associated to it, and women sounding names with their profiles had negative. And then they even did the thing where they switched the names on the exact same profiles. So they switched the names on the profiles that had positive and negative. They switched the names, and it still followed. The name and the associations followed the names. So by getting rid of names out of the resume, you also start removing more opportunities for implicit bias amongst female, male. I would also assume non-binary people would have when reading that name. It might influence the way they read that resume, the qualifications. So you got to be careful. And then I actually suggested offline to everybody, I said, what about removing colleges? Because if you're looking at 500 resumes and you somehow see MIT, well, that's a great way to make sure that you're only going to get white males, because that's who goes to MIT and in their technology and everything like that. Harvard, Stanford, all of the Ivy League schools, it's largely white, largely male dominated. And rich people. So you even get other demographics too that, you maybe don't want to all just load into your program. You skip the historically black colleges. You skip the community colleges, which have more financially strapped people, which have more people of color, more queer people. So you skip all of those people over because you were preferring the named colleges there. Remove the college name, because then what you'll see exactly what you probably wanted to see anyway. They have a bachelor's degree in computer science. Honestly, just remove the degree anyway. You don't need it. But if for some reason you need that degree in there, remove the unnecessary bit, the name, because you really shouldn't care about the name that is on that to select the resume for review and get an interview in. So that was an idea. Another idea they brought up was, we need less allies and more accomplices. An ally is someone who's going to amplify what you're saying, promote and, do all of that, and is possibly going to give money to causes and things like that and clap and everything. But an accomplice is someone who's going to be there for the consequences. When you think about protesting, I was probably honestly more of an ally than an accomplice. I did my fair share on LinkedIn and I did my fair share on Twitter, trying to get black people's voices amplified out there, call out some BS from time to time. But I'm just a dude on a computer keyboard. I walk away and nobody cares. There's no consequence to me doing any of that. But there were plenty of people, white people in general, who went to protests and were tear gassed and had and stood in front of black people as they were angry over having their people murdered by cops, and expressing that anger publicly and peacefully, as far as not being violent. And they were there to basically set a barrier in front of police. You will go through us first before you get to them. That is being an accomplice. Getting that tear gas to the face, taking the bullets, those rubber bullets for those folks, joining them in jail because you got jailed, you got disappeared. We saw people disappeared off the streets in mysterious vans by people in camouflage. With no identification. We have no idea what happened to a lot of those people. Like, I haven't done the research on it, but no one knows. But there are people who went through consequences in that. That is, I will say, more of an extreme version of accompliceship, because that really goes to more the survival of people and everything like that. But it can even happen in the business context. Speaking up and even putting your reputation, credibility, and name on the line, possibly even your promotion and further career at that company on the line, because maybe it's a superior who, tells a woman to stop bitching at him in a meeting, or calls a woman bossy, or makes a racially charged comments about a black person, whether they're in the room or not. You speaking up about that, not being the main character about it, if you will, but at least calling it out and saying that, because that can get you into consequences, where now you're the person kind of shuffled around and no longer important, no longer given, career advancing projects and things like that, that's where you start taking some potential consequential hits. That's where you start becoming an accomplice. There's an entire video, and I'm learning more and more about what that means, but there's an entire video probably to go about through that. The last little takeaway I have for everybody here is actively seeking feedback from users, product owners, leadership, etc., and formalizing your feedback gathering. So that's a very interesting concept there. So, of course, you can watch a previous video. I think it's me in a hot tub in Vegas, actually. That was a popular video. Go check it out. And it was me talking about incident postmortems. I think that's actually the title of it, Glass of OJ Post-Incident Postmortems. And basically, that's a perfect opportunity after you've had an incident or an emergency action, getting everybody to come back, review kind of an overview or summary of what happened, when it happened, what we knew, when we did what, and then listing out things that you observed or people had gathered and observed went well. You'll find people disagree about what went well and to what degree, what didn't go well, and to what degree, and the gaps to bridge improvement. But there's also feedback from the implementation of policies or standards or projects that aren't necessarily emergency, but when you roll out controls projects like MFA or NAC or just any project you could think of, have you sought feedback from users who might be impacted or see hardship through these actions that you may not have thought of? Maybe you put a review process in for new vendors, and so the new vendor process requires, like SaaS providers provide a whole bunch of answers to questions, go through a review process with a committee to risk rate and do a whole bunch of stuff around that. Have users of that process and business leaders or even just project leaders give you feedback about how that process works and if it's enabling them or what could be done better. Formalize that process as well. Some tools like ServiceNow can help you because you maybe intake that from there, and then maybe a final action once that's closed is to send out a survey form and saying, hey, we just went through and resolved this request. We need you to go ahead and fill out the survey if you would. Let us know, how was this process? Where were the pain points? Where did you feel like it was moving too slow? Did this waste your time? Did we explain to you? Do you feel like you understood what we were trying to accomplish here? Those are great points to try and understand. And your goal should, of course, with listening, should never be to respond or defend yourself. The goal of listening in this case is to try and find a way to make the process better. Maybe change the process completely. Maybe you even find that the goal you thought this process was achieving isn't even achieving that goal. And you'll find that out through the review process. There's a lot of things you can learn from the users at the line level that you won't learn from leaders. It takes a while to trickle up, word to trickle up. A lot of people will just keep comments to themselves and just be like, who's going to listen to me? We'll interject and get that out to people and say, yes, please put that in there. Formalize it. As well as do impromptu and improvised levels of feedback requests. But that's really all the key takeaways we have there. So sticks should be apportioned to ownership and accountability. Use those sticks, cudgels, consequence threats, those little power plays. Use the ones that work best for your audience. Maybe we're innovating our workers out of our companies unnecessarily so because we're not supporting them. When you're hiring people, refuse to even interview people until you've been assured that the folks in the candidate pool are sufficiently diverse. There's a sufficiently diverse number of people there. Remove names from those resumes and applications as they come to you for review for the interview process. And maybe even consider taking college names out of that. Ask your HR department to help you with that. Work on being an accomplice rather than an ally in the workplace. And actively seek feedback. What do you think about all of that? If you're perhaps somebody who had one of those key takeaways, who you feel seen in that because you're like, oh yeah, that was my comment or that was my idea. Hey, feel free to comment in LinkedIn or on Twitter if you're seeing that here, or even in the comments down here in this video. Participate in a conversation. Did you disagree with anything that was in here? Did you disagree with maybe some of my interpretation of these takeaways? That's completely fine as well. Let's have a discussion about this. I think it's very great for us to discuss things that we disagree on, because I think when we do so with an eye towards understanding what each other's meaning, what we're trying to accomplish, I think then we start coming back to this middle ground where we're no longer to maybe the extremes we were, and we're closer to this middle ground. And I think we're usually closer to the truth, or getting to the truth of where we probably should be. And as always, it depends. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, and even my cat Zelda's ready for me to be done with this glass of OJ. I'll see you in the next one.